Aaron, I've never done this. I have two podcasts and I've literally never talked about this love story, this love affair with pickleball, which started 8 years ago. And then if you had told me 8 years ago that I would one day become the face of Gamma, I would have said, you need to return your crystal ball for a full refund, because I do not believe that for 1 second.
Today, I'm sitting down with pickleball visionary, industry shaker, pro player, and influencer Jill Braverman, known by many as Jilly B. Usually when you hear the word influencer, you think of someone posting cool videos on their social media. Jill does in fact do that. However, her role as an influencer of the sport spans far beyond producing content, as she's played a major part in actually building some of pickleball's most notable organizations. Jill grew up playing tennis and earned a D1 scholarship to play for Pepperdine University. Earlier in her career, she worked as an actress and model, then had a couple business development roles before finding a passion in technology. She worked as a startup strategist, eventually founded and ran a hiring company called Skillzz in 2017, became the head of commercial for world-leading sports technology company UTR Sports, then made her way into pickleball, where she became the CEO of DUPR, a leading pickleball rating company in 2022. If you thought that wasn't enough, she also served as the chief of staff for Major League Pickleball in 2023 and still maintains her own consulting firm. She engaged in one of the wildest pivots I've ever seen in someone's career, moving from an industry leader off court to an industry leader on court, diving into a professional playing career in 2023. Some of her playing accolades include a silver medal in singles at nationals, a world #3 ranking in singles, and going on to become MVP of Major League Pickleball in 2023. Jill also has a life off court. She's married to her wife, Kristen. She loves to ski and golf, and she has a variety of other pickleball-related ventures outside of just playing pro. So thank you so much for coming on, Jill, and excited to hear your story today.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm so excited. The untold origin story, how the love affair with pickleball started, and boy, is it a love affair.
Yes. And I'm so excited to hear about it. So you were a successful college athlete, a tech innovator, CEO of multiple companies, a consultant, top pro athlete. When you were a little girl and people asked what you wanted to do when you grow up, did you tell them you wanted to do everything?
By your introduction, it really seemed that way. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. How old am I? No, I told people I wanted to be an attorney. My father was an attorney, and I swear, Aaron, sometimes with all these different business endeavors, it sure does feel like I am an attorney.
I hear you. What was your first sort of like, this is what I want to do when I grow up?
That's a great question. You know, it's a little bit monkey see, monkey do when you have older siblings. And my oldest sister was a professional tennis player. She was #1 in the country at 16 years old in the 18 and unders. She actually traveled on the USTA national traveling team, which at the time, fun fact, was run by Ken Herman, who would later, of course, start the APP tour. And now I work closely with Ken. So full circle, really interesting. And then my older sister, Natalie, played #1 at Pepperdine all 4 years, was an NCAA All-American, just an amazing player. And I was like the runt of the litter. I was only top 50 in the country, Aaron. I didn't play #1 at Pepperdine until I was a junior there. And so for me, I looked at my sisters and I was like, oh, I want to be a pro tennis player. I want to be that good. So it was kind of between the attorney and the athlete that I found myself.
Were you from a family that prioritized racket sports from a young age, that very strongly encouraged athletic dominance, or was this something that you guys all sort of evolved to naturally?
My mom and dad fell in love on the tennis court, and they put rackets in our hands from a very, very early age. And again, it's like monkey see, monkey do when you have the older siblings doing it.
Right. Different things throughout our younger years help shape the personality we have and the person we end up becoming. Can you talk about some of the people or experiences early on in your life that made a huge impact on who you ended up becoming?
That is a great question. I met the president of Monster Energy Company. Her name is Emily Thierry. I met her probably 10 years ago, and she was the first ever vice president at Anheuser-Busch, this huge publicly traded beer company, as I'm sure you're familiar with. And she was just this trailblazing woman who is now, like I said, president of Monster Energy. And she was the first time I had seen a woman, young too, that was dominating the corporate field, but she was also a scratch golfer. And she also played tennis. And she also went to college at 16 years old, like I did. She didn't go to Pepperdine, but she went to USD. And I would say that was probably one of the most formative experiences of my young, early adulthood, was seeing this woman who was just unstoppable and could do anything.
I was going to ask about your sisters and the competitive nature, but you already explained some of it. So do you feel like there was a lot of pressure to follow in their footsteps to rise to that level, or was it really a natural, organic, hey, I just want to do what they're doing and see how it goes?
So my older sister Natalie is now actually playing pro pickleball, and she's got three children under the age of 8, and she is like a world beater. She can outlast me on the court. She's going to be so good. We actually just played together at the APP Newport Beach. We got 4th place. We actually made it to the semifinals, which was, really cool for her second ever pro tournament. And what I think is really, really cool, if you look at the pro field, and maybe this is just a function of it's still so nascent, we're really early on in it, is like 15% of the females in the top 40 are over the age of 28. And you've got like Tina Piznik, you have Irina Tereshchenko, Simone Jargin, you have players in their 40s who are still dominant, who are still playing so well. So I think something that is so fun about our sport is the barrier to entry is low, and it doesn't require this tennis physicality, right? I think it's more mental in some ways and more strategy based. And I don't think if that really answered your question, was feeling the pressure from my sisters. I think it's more fun. Like, we've always had fun with it, and we were always so far apart in age. So I've got 5.5 years between my older sister, 10 years between my oldest, that it wasn't necessarily competitive or pressure filled. It was more like, how can we help each other? So it was more like they were guiding me, less about like, hey, we're being competitive with you, or you've got all this pressure on you. I always thought it was funny that I was like literally the runt of the litter, not physically, I'm the tallest, but in terms of skill, because they were just that freaking good.
Yeah, yeah. And 10 years apart is a lot. I mean, that means not only do your parents love tennis, but they love raising kids because they really spaced it out there. Um,
They really did.
So I have a ton of specific questions that I'm excited to ask you about different parts of your career as a professional and a pro player. But I really wanted to just start by actually sitting back for a little bit and just giving you a chance to explain your story. I'd love it. You could just take the wheel and give me a brief run through of your athletic and professional career. How you've blended becoming a
Sure.
college tennis player to a pickleball lover to then getting into the technology space and then dominating pickleball technology and then coming back to pro pickleball. So give me sort of your maybe
For
short
sure.
version of the full circle story of Jilly B.
Aaron, I've never done this. I have 2 podcasts, and I've literally never talked about this love story, this love affair with pickleball, which started 8 years ago. And ironically, I ordered a $30 paddle, the Gamma Fusion, on Amazon. And if you had told me 8 years ago that I would one day become the face of Gamma, I would have said, you need to return your crystal ball for a full refund, because I do not believe that for 1 second. I moved to the Bay Area 8 years ago to start my first tech company. And for some reason, I spend 2 years working on my tech company, but also falling back in love with tennis, of all things. Crazy. Like, why would I do that, right? I, like a lot of female D1 athletes, burned their equipment post-graduation. So metaphorically and physically burned my tennis rackets. But then it was kind of nice, falling back in love with it. And about 6 years ago, I was acqui-hired by UTR, Universal Tennis Rating at the time. And I really fell in love with their vision. And acqui-hire is this fancy Silicon Valley term, Aaron, for when a company really wants to work with a founder who has their own startup, but they don't want to purchase like their technology. They don't have a use for what they've built, but they want to bring them on the team. And like I said, I fell in love with the vision, the mission. UTR was democratizing finally tools and technology in tennis. It was providing a rating system that cut across gender, age, geography, which you have to understand at the time was completely revolutionary, because if you're an 8-year-old burgeoning female tennis player and you're playing USTA events, they just want to put you in a category with other 8-year-old tennis players, of which there only might be like 3 8-year-old females in California that could compete against you. And so to be able to cut across age and have these results in your backyard without having to travel, expensive travel to earn ranking points across the country, was such a gift and such a cool concept that I really wanted to be a part of. So I work for UTR, and our chief data scientist, Justin, says to me, Jill, you played pickleball, right? And I was like, well, I mean, I have a paddle. Like, I've played a couple times in the past couple of years. And he was like, why don't you come with me and my friends to Menlo Park? I've got a group of guys and gals, and let's play. It'll be fun. Aaron, they clean my clock. Right. And I'm like Miss Ego, D1 athlete, former tennis player, like, and I'm losing, just losing. And I'm like, what is going on? And they go, you could be kind of good if you really learn how to play pickleball. And so I love that pickleball has a way of like sucking the living ego out of you, right? Really humbling you, making you learn that like dinking is the fun stuff, right? It's where the magic happens. It's like where the chess component of the game enters. And for 6 months, Aaron, I'm like obsessed with pickleball. And I go to the powers to be at UTR, and I'm like on my hands and knees begging them to start a pickleball rating system. I played my first tournament 5.5 years ago, July 2019. It was called the Golden State Championships in Concord, California. It wasn't an APP, it wasn't a PPA because those entities weren't around. I wore matching knee pads
Nice.
with my male partner, Dave Proposal Velardo, who earns the nickname Proposal because he's always on his knees. And we beat Martina Coakley and Colin Johns. We lose to Ben Johns and Irina Tereshchenko in like 5 minutes flat. I played Michelle Escobar and Steve Deacon. In women's, it was Lauren Stratman's first ever tournament. Jesse Irvin was there. And we were like the original psychos, the original weirdos who played for nothing. But Aaron, it wasn't for nothing because it was for the love of it. That was everything, like the genuine obsession of it. And yeah, again, during that time, I'm like begging UTR to do the rating. They would have had like a solid year and a half head start on DUPR had they done it. And at the time, they were like, no, we're rebranding from UTR to Universal Tennis. And they didn't want to do it. And I respect that because like you're in the startup world too. And when you're in tech, everything's the shiny penny. It's so easy to go an inch deep and a mile wide. And what we always want is the inverse of that, right? We had started the UTR Pro Tennis Tour at the same time. COVID had just gotten started and we were drowning in opportunities. Racket sports were exploding. And so you want to focus on your main vertical. And for them, that was tennis. And if you're not going to focus on your main vertical, you better have some seriously compelling data to earn the shift in strategy. And no one knew, right, how explosive pickleball was going to be, except really, Steve Kuhn, or if you played it yourself, because all you have to do is step on a court to understand the magic of it. It's this chemical thing. It's this physiological thing. So Steve Kuhn calls me and literally as I'm leaving UTR, and I was so burned out of like ratings, racket sports, technology. But Steve and I get introduced by Irina Tereshchenko, with whom I'd become friends and training partners. And he says, look, I know you're burned out, but what if I told you you could do everything you want to do with pickleball ratings at UTR that you wanted to do, but you can do it. And I will let you run this business the way you want to, make it your own. And I said, well, that's really compelling, but let me check my non-compete. And it was right around this time I played my first nationals, made it to the finals in singles, beat Mary Brasha and Irina, but then lost to this 14-year-old girl named Annalie Waters. My whole family was who's that? My whole family's making fun of me for losing to a teenager. And I'm like, no, I think this girl's going to be like really, really good, guys.
Yeah.
And so,
What
yeah,
happened?
Aaron, yeah, I ran DUPR for a little over a year. I helped them get results in. And what people don't understand is like an algorithm is only as good as the data that goes into it. We built the player database. We built the regional lists that helped make DUPR this thing of intrigue for players all over the world. We retooled the algorithm. And I knew DUPR for me would always be a vehicle to something else in pickleball. So I became chief of staff for MLP for a very short period of time. And I'll never forget watching MLP Mesa January of 2023, almost 2 years ago, sitting with the then CEO, Brian Levine, who looks at me and goes, do you miss it? Because I'd given up playing pro to run DUPR. I thought there was this conflict of interest. And I said, yeah, I miss it. And that's when it really clicked for me to make a return to pro and to actually try and do it full time. And everyone thought I was nuts. And Aaron, you have to remember, this was right before the big player contracts came into play. So again, I make this decision to go pro when there's like little to no money in it, leaving my corporate career behind. And I'd rather be lucky than good. And I think that was a lucky decision.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it worked out great. I appreciate this really fruitful story. So many different components. I don't even know where to really dive in, but I do want to talk about the technology, the specific rating technology sphere for a little bit. You know, you worked at DUPR when there really wasn't a pickleball technology. You basically came in to create a vision, or at least start executing on a vision for the future of pickleball technology. Now, obviously, the sphere is there's a few different ratings. You know, the space is still working itself out. But when you sat down with really no other ratings in front of you and trying to just craft a vision from the start, what was your vision for an ideal, the ideal way that a pickleball technology would actually work in the world of pickleball?
That's a great question. And again, this is something I've literally never talked about. I always differed in my vision with the founder and the then primary and principal owner, Steve Kuhn, who you were so nice. You said in my introduction, you called me a visionary. He is like the true visionary of the sport, and I'm so lucky to have worked alongside him for as long as I did. But we had one huge bone of contention between us from day one, which was he wanted to build a rating system that was really easy to understand, that was really like beloved, that was likable, that was fun to like play with and put scores in. And you could see that your rating went up after this match or down after this match. And I wanted to build something that was the most accurate. Because if you're accurate, you're respected. And I always have this joke with ratings where 50% of the people tell you their rating is too low and 50% tell you it's too high, you know you're doing a good job. And I knew coming from UTR that being a little bit of a black box was not a bad thing. Having a little bit of magic sauce was not a bad thing. And that you can't build a rating that is beloved because you're going to have half the people telling you it's too high and the other half telling you it's too low. So what did I want to do, Aaron? I wanted to build the most accurate rating system possible, which is really hard to do in doubles. It's really, really hard to separate, to disentangle performance among pairs is the fancy way that we say doubles. In singles, it's very easy. Anyone can build a singles algorithm.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And I want to get your thoughts on sort of where we're headed. Now, I wouldn't ask you to comment specifically on one business versus another. Obviously, you have ties to both, but
Yeah.
there are multiple ratings right now. The ratings do slightly different things. There are rating systems based in America. There's global rating systems. Where do you think pickleball should evolve into from a ratings perspective? Multiple ratings coexisting, focusing on different players, one rating that's all encompassing with very clear messaging and even more accuracy. Where do you think we should go from a rating perspective?
It's a fun and it's a fun and interesting question because I have equity in UTR. I actually don't have equity in DUPR, which is a whole nother story for a very another time. But I obviously have very personal and qualitative ties to DUPR. Let's put it that way. A lot of the people I hired are still there, and you help build something, you feel beholden to it, right? So I am in this really interesting position to be rooting. I guess you could say I'm diversified. There's a nice way to say it. I'm rooting for the sport to win, and I really think this bifurcation that's happening with ratings right now is not ideal. It's beyond not ideal. You have USA Pickleball working with UTR. You've got APP working with UTR, and then you've got pickleball.com, the PPA, MLP, UPA working with DUPR. And what that's creating is this bifurcation of data. So just the other day, I noticed like my APP results aren't in my DUPR anymore. Well, a rating's only as good as the data that goes in. So I think in an ideal world, you would have, one Pro Tour. You'd have one rating. You'd have an ecosystem that really works. You'd have an international governing body that everyone points to and aligns with. And if we can't get to that, we can say goodbye to any aspirations of pickleball being in the Olympics. So what we have to be careful of as an industry is avoiding the pitfalls tennis made and tennis has made. We look at tennis and it's alphabet soup. You have a tennis background. ATP, ITF, USTA, UTR. I could go on and on. USPTA, PTR, right? It's acronym
UPS and
soup.
TUV, WX. I don't even know at this point. Yeah.
I was watching something last night called UTS, the Ultimate Tennis Showdown. I was like, I'm sure
Right.
there's a story here. Like, this is really cool. Who owns this? Who's running with this? So I think we have to be really careful of that. And I think the more we can collaborate, the better, not just for the ecosystem, but the better for the businesses right now. Like we're still early. It's still nascent enough to collaborate and work together. And I don't think that's naive. I think that is a reality that would behoove everyone. From players to sponsors to the endemics to people who want to get into the sport. When it's fragmented like this, you see this hesitancy from sponsors, from big names wanting to come in and invest in pickleball or invest in a tour, right? Creates confusion. PPA, I'm the best tour in the world. APP, no, we're the best tour in the world. PPA, I'm the first. No, we were the first, right? And now UTR DUPR. Like it creates confusion.
Yeah. And I agree. And I think a lot of people would agree that some form of a solution, it needs to have just really clear messaging around what this pro tour is, what this rating means, and just a very clear direction for sort of, what we can expect. And I think from your perspective, more than many other people, you can actually speak on how decision makers and leaders in those organizations might think. So again, without giving specifics on, who should do what, or how should things go down? What do you think is a general perspective on what we can expect for like how this can actually happen? If we're talking
I think
about one
I
national body, one pro tour, how can that work?
Well, I think you could just have also a little bit of a war of attrition here. I think we've seen a lot of dumb money flood into the sport. I think that there is, in some aspects, on the pro side of things, a pickleball bubble. I think you've got, UPA saddled with incredible player contract debt. That is a distraction from money they could be spending elsewhere, from building a sustainable, scalable business. You've got the APP that's kind of put its head down and is building and is profitable and is building a scalable business. You've got UTR that's been around quite a bit of time now, and again is kind of like slow and steady. We didn't rush into pickleball. We wanted to do it right. You've got DUPR that was burning capital super fast, had to come in and basically Steve sold the business a couple of years ago, actually about a year and a half ago. So I think you could just say like, hey, we're really nascent in the sport. Like in 3 years, think about how the landscape has changed, Aaron, from when you got involved. Like if someone had told you 3 years ago you'd be here with your businesses in pickleball, you'd say absolutely not. Get a refund on that crystal ball. So I think in a really short span of time, especially when all these player contracts from the pro side come up for renewal and players are released, I think you could see like a very different landscape emerging. So if you're a business right now and you just want to keep your head down and keep doing the work, like that might benefit you greatly in 2, 3, 4 years. I also think you've got these international players entering the sport that cannot be counted out, like PWR Pickleball World Ranking. Then you have Global Pickleball, which is a competing India league
Right.
backed by a bunch of Bollywood celebrities.
Yep.
It's just a fascinating time.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I love it. Absolutely. And within that answer, I think something a little bit separate that I resonate with so much I wanted to highlight is you spoke about the sport as a recreational sport, pro side maybe being a little bit of a bubble, but that the
Yeah.
sport itself is really what we need to watch out and invest in.
Yeah.
From our perspective, running a pickleball academy and a media company that targets what we call the 95+%, we have invested our lives into the recreational
Mhm.
aspect of the sport. The people that want to grow and get better, the people that love the people that built a court in their backyard, or the 95-year-old that still plays, or the fact that the population is growing of player, like that stuff is cool. We could talk about the pro scene all day, but I'm actually with you that it may be a bubble. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not afraid to say it. We'll see what happens, and I'm super curious to sit back with my
And
popcorn. But what I know is a sure thing is the fact that this is going to be one of the most played sports in the entire world and the most played sport in America because of all the beautiful aspects that we all know
and
about.
I couldn't agree more. And bubble's a strong word, but let's say highly speculative. The pro side of the sport is highly speculative. What isn't speculative is the recreational players, is the 99.9% of players out there who probably have limited to no interest, right, in the pro game, or could maybe not name you 2 or 3 pros or their favorite pro. So I think you have this really interesting bet going on that these recreational players will tune in, will get involved. And then you look at something like football, where you don't have a lot of recreational players, but you have a massive viewership. You look at tennis. Tennis has 20 million players in the US. You know, every time I ask someone how many pickleball players there are, I hear anything from 10 to 12 to 15 to 25, Aaron. So I'll have to wait for the next SFIA data to be released. So you've got 20 million players in the US, but you've got massive, massive viewership in tennis. A lot of that is the gambling aspect of it, which is kind of the dark side of the sport. Not a lot of people want to talk about, but it is why there is so much intrigue and interest and high viewership. So the bet is that, you know, these millions of pickleball players will tune in and start to get interested in the pro game. And I do not think from the numbers I have seen that that has been validated yet.
Right. No, yeah, that makes sense. I hear you. A lot of these sports, football, a good example, people watch, they grow up loving watching, and then they play because they watch. In pickleball, it's definitely flipped 180 degrees. Everybody plays. Some people may watch
Yep.
because they play. I had one more question on the technology side, just because it's not very often I get to sit down with a technology enthusiast within pickleball, especially. There's very few of you guys, and so basically. We talked about where we are now with pickleball technology, ratings, but ratings aside, just in
Mhm.
general, when you think about pickleball technology, from AI and automated line calls to the way we can analyze matches, um, literally the whole scope. If you had a magic crystal ball where you can actually create whatever future you wanted, if you could literally craft future technologies that you think will be best for the pro scene or the recreational scene or any pickleball players, and you literally had some time to just create that just through your words, what do you want to see in the future? What can we do?
That's a great question. Obviously, the line call technology exists for tennis. There's very limited reasons why we cannot start implementing that for pickleball, probably other than cost. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about the line calls or the automatic foot fault systems that could be easily repurposed from tennis. I'm intrigued from a coaching component with computer vision and AI, and it's something that I've had limited experience in the past couple of years. I've known a couple founders who've gotten involved and have tried to build computer vision for pickleball. And I think that you've got a couple tennis companies that do this, but no one is quite doing it right. And why I think that is such a big market for pickleball is there's really no pedagogy on instruction, right? You have maybe 50 incredible instructors in America and no real teaching book on the sport. And a lot of that, and this is no knock to the instructors, the tennis instructors who are transitioning to trying to learn pickleball, they've got to figure out how to keep the score first, right? Before they can teach you how to hold the paddle. And that's hard. And this is no knock on PTR, PPR, USPTA, or any of the teaching organizations. It's a reflection that the sport is evolving. Every time I step on the court, I am learning something new, truly, every single time, or figuring out a slightly different way to articulate how to hit a certain shot to someone. And so I think there's all these opportunities in coaching, and computer vision and artificial intelligence could be a huge, huge piece of that if we can get it right.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's so much growth that can happen just from, at least players can improve a lot more if there's a better framework and system for how coaches it can be more successful. I mean, I could go on for multiple hours
Right?
on the rating or on the certifications, being an academy owner, and people reach out saying, "Hey, I got PPR certified. Hey, I got this or that." And for us, that's actually when we stop listening, to be honest.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's the opposite. People use that as like the words DR. Dude, I can work on somebody's heart because I have DR in my title. Okay, just because you fill out something online in 2 hours and you have a certification does not mean you need to be a high level player and a good communicator with good fundamentals, understanding of the game. So
And if we can democratize that, right? So this is why it's so important. If we can democratize what's in my head and the other pros and instructors' heads and put that into a really simple software solution for everyone at home to get better, well, what does that mean? That means they're deepening their relationship with the sport. They're getting better. They've got that addicting feeling of improvement. And then they want to go buy a paddle. Then they want to join a local league. Then they want to enter a tournament. Then they want to take more lessons. Like, it builds on itself. And part of what is so special about pickleball is it doesn't require a ton of skill to get started. It doesn't require a ton of knowledge to get started, but we do want to be able to afford people equal opportunity to get better. And I think computer vision is a huge component of that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Huge opportunity there. I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the personal skills that you've had to engage to be able to withstand so many career changes and working in so many different environments. I think that one of the best qualities somebody can have as a professional is trust in themselves, comfortability with going with their heart, even sometimes taking a risk in the direction of just what feels right, which usually ends up being the best decision, whether it's health-wise, financially, all of that stuff ends up being usually right if you're going with where your heart lies. And that's what you've done multiple times. I wanted to ask, how do you know when it feels right to switch careers? And then how do you do so efficiently and effectively and in a healthy way?
I don't know if it's so much as when it feels right versus when it feels wrong. I think we all know when something doesn't, when something feels wrong, like you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe you've seen something through, right? Like I was at UTR, I was employee number 13. Might have been earlier than that. I left and we had 101 employees. Like it was time, right? Like I love technology when it's at the startup phase. But when do you stop becoming a startup? When do you lose that mentality? When do you lose the ability to go from an idea in the morning to pitching your CEO on it, to talking to the CTO, to having it in the product roadmap by 5 p.m. And you're like, oh my God, I had this idea, you know, 9 hours ago, and now I'm watching it get developed. So when you find yourself in a position where you're developing reporting for the sake of reporting and reports for the reports that you just developed the reports on, that's when I think it's time for me to go. So I think part of it is not so much knowing when it's right versus knowing when it feels wrong. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally makes sense. Um, so, this is sometimes maybe a harder question to answer, but you've done a lot of things right in your career. What struggles do you think you've had throughout your career, and what are some ways you've overcame those struggles?
Yeah, no, that's easy to talk about actually. But before I answer that question, I also want to just highlight having a great support system, like being able to bounce ideas off of family, friends. Like, you need to have a red team. I just read this in Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, and the red team are the people in your life that tell you when you're off your rocker, when you have a bad idea. They're there to shut you
Yeah.
down. They're there to challenge you. So if you don't have that red team, go out and assemble, 2, 3, 4, 5 people and tell them what you want them for. You want them for truth, right? And so for me, my wife has been so supportive. I mean, when I went to her and said, "Hey, I'm going to quit my corporate job as chief of staff of MLP and recently CEO of DUPR, and I'm going to go play professional pickleball at 33 years old. And I've been sitting in a desk for 8 years, so I don't even really know if my body can do this. And by the way, there's no money in this." And she's like, "Yeah, you should do that." Right? Like, I don't want to, I can't progress to the next question until I address how important it is to A, have a red team, and B, have a support system.
I agree. I'm so glad you stopped me. That's a good point. I'm gonna go call my friends. Hey, do you love me enough to hate me? That's basically what you have to ask.
Exactly. That is so well said, Aaron. Can I reuse that? Do you love me enough to hate on me right now?
Yes, you can absolutely use that free of royalties and use it in whatever way you like. Uh,
Um, no, so I'd love to talk about the struggle. Yeah, again, this is not something I talk a lot about, and hopefully people find it helpful. But when I was, 8 years ago, started my first ever technology company, which was a peer-to-peer hiring marketplace. I was a non-technical first-time founder. I raised money. I built, prototyped, and developed an app. But again, I'm non-technical. It's this like whole journey. I had no idea what I was doing, like literally building the plane as we were flying in it. And uh, then you go to Northern California, you move to build a team, and you're doing all these things, and you're like, also really lonely, like incredibly lonely. Am I doing this right? Like, how do you scale something without the right team around you? And I think that I really struggled with that. And finding UTR was a gift, but it also meant like giving up on what I was doing. And I had like taken friends and family's money into my company. I had invested over $100,000 of my own money. And I had to make this pivot and this decision. And that was a huge, huge struggle, and a huge moment of like, can I make this change? Should I give up on X because I think Y is going to be incredible? And I did that, and I don't look back. I kind of consider that like my MBA and my investment into technology and learning and myself. But yeah, that was a huge struggle. And for anyone who's like, Peter Thiel says he doesn't believe failure is this like learning lesson. He's like, I think failure is just simply a tragedy. I disagree. I actually think everything leads to what was meant to be. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I also loved Peter Thiel's quote, competition is for losers. That's also one of my favorites.
I
So
love that quote of his. He's like, I'd rather be successful than competitive.
yeah, the capitalistic market, people think that it's all about healthy competition, but if you're actually competing 50-50, all the profits are competed away. So strive to do something different.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess controversial figure, but I think great business mind. Um, so, um, anyways, yeah. So when you were, I guess actually one thing is would be curious to hear how did Skillzz with three Z's end up?
Two Z's.
Two Z's. Sorry. Yeah. How did things go? There.
So I was acqui-hired by UTR. So again, it's this decision of like, well, do I abandon what I've been building for 2 years? Like I'm just getting started with it. I've raised money. I've got users. Do I kind of shut that down or put it on the back burner while I go and explore this, Series B SaaS company that's like taking over the world of tennis? That seems like it was like built for me. This role was literally built for me. And so I basically gave up pursuing Skillzz to work for UTR.
Did the company continue with a new leader, or did the company just wind down?
I wound it down.
Got it. So in your decision to let's fast forward a little bit. Now you're super you're killing it in every single, basically all these endeavors as a tech leader. And then you jump to pro pickleball. So I guess for complete transparency, I've been excited to ask this question for a while because I've been trying to wrap my head around that decision. Everybody dreams of playing pro sports, and you just did it. So I totally understand that you had a chance to go all in full time as a pro athlete. You followed your heart. So maybe that's the answer to the question. But I have to ask, as a business person, as someone that understands the value, and the reward that tech leaders are able to attain from building successful tech companies, which you were doing. I mean, the short version of my question is basically in three capital letters, why?
Yeah, it's a great question. I kept waiting for the game to pass me by. So I was one of the early diehard, crazies in the sport, right? 5.5 years ago, playing my first pro tournament. And I just kept waiting for everyone to beat me, for all the young players to come in, the teenagers. And I just remember being like, yeah, I'm good at this now, but that's because there's just no one that good in it. Like I can't be that good. There's no way. And I'll never forget, I hired Anna Bright and she worked for me at DUPR. She's just brilliant. Such a mature young woman and was an incredible product manager. And we were playing at the MLP in Newport Beach, like 2.5 years ago. And keep in mind, I'm like in a desk chair, 10 hours a day. And we played some skinny singles. And I was like, I still got this. Like, this is crazy. Like, that's Anna Bright. I should not be hanging in there with Anna Bright. So I always felt, Aaron, like I was waiting for the game to pass me by, but it wasn't. And if anything, I was getting better. So my advice to anyone who wants to go pro or is thinking about it is how are you doing? Like, have you won a 5-0 tournament? Have you won the local pro Kappa tournament, the NVZ? Like, where are you in comparison to other people against whom you're playing, other pros? Because that's what helped me have the confidence to stay in it, was I was still winning tournaments. I was still competitive. I was still playing well. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And I think one factor too, which I would be curious to hear kind of how you compare your decision to the decision others have to make. You made that decision also at a time where I would assume, you had a pretty or you have a pretty financial or pretty safe financial, back end in terms of, what you've been able to attain from the companies you've worked in before. I think a lot of young people deciding to come into pro pickleball right now might be going straight from high school, straight from
Hmm.
college, leaving the first few years of their working career to go pursue something in the best time in their athletic career to do so. Um, I feel like maybe the decision you had might have had a little bit more stability in a sense of financial background. How do you think others should navigate that decision that maybe don't have,
Yeah.
a safety sort of financial net to fall on?
Absolutely. So I had a spouse that was still employed, still working. Obviously, I had done okay for myself, 8 years in technology. And I also saw money entering the sport, not the crazy contracts we all saw 8 months later, but I saw the fact that you could win MLP and walk away with $20,000. I saw that there was, Anheuser-Busch was interested in sponsoring and buying a team. Like LeBron James, right? Like there were all these little, not so little signs that money was entering the sport. And if you're going to take a gamble, the best thing you can do is gamble on yourself. And with the support of my wife, for me, it was a no-brainer. But I don't want to discount how difficult that decision is when you actually look at the genuine costs associated with it right now. So if we just do a little bit of math, um, got my calculator out, right? So let's say you want to play just two events. So you want to play mixed and gender, and you want to play a pro tournament. You have to go into qualifying, $600. So we're not even going to say singles. We're not even going to say three events. Okay. So we're going to say $600. Let's say you're going to play 20 events this year. That's conservative. There's probably over 100 pro pickleball tournaments in 2025 available, and even more than that when you look at the local level. So you're going to spend $12,000, Aaron, on entry fees,
Just entry.
non-refundable entry fees. I say non-refundable, and what I mean by that is, a lot of pro players get their like I've won gold on the APP, so I don't pay entry fees, right? They have these rules. So if you haven't won gold on the APP, you're paying your entry fees. If you're not a PPA signed player, you're paying your entry fees.
Right.
Why don't we talk about like hotel and airfare and right? Like it's very expensive to
We'll have
make
to
that
turn the
leap right now.
calculator sideways. We have to get a new calculator to even see that number. Yeah.
Which is why I say play as much locally as you can. Go win every local 5-0 tournament you can, every local money ball you can.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. So you obviously, bet on yourself, and you it was a good bet. You've been very successful. So you were MLP's MVP in 2023. The year you got back into pro pickleball, you became the most valuable player. How did that feel? And just talk about the what it took and how it felt to come in and be successful on the pro tour.
It was MLP MVP of the Challenger League, and it was with Dallas, and we won it too. So that was pretty cool to have a title. It was, I mean, everything you could dream of. We talk about coming into something with zero expectations and being like, I'm probably going to lose a lot of money this year. I'm probably going to get injured. And being able to have that early success was again that feeling of like, okay, I belong here. And I think that's something we all struggle with is imposter syndrome. Like I still struggle with it. I'm 35 years old and I've started companies and been CEO of companies and chief operating officer of companies. And it's like, do I really belong here? And to have those early wins in a career is helpful to tell you that you do. And that's why I say again, like if you're just starting out, go win. Go win. I don't care if it's a 5-0, 4-5 tournament, like get out there and have those early successes.
I would love to hear some advice you might have for a pro player, someone that's thinking about playing pro, who's thinking about how they're going to divide their time and what they're going to focus on. This is obviously subjective to the player. I'm really good friends with Richard Liverneese Jr.
Yeah.
You
He's
know,
good. He's
he's,
really good.
he's so
He's
hungry. He loves
he's
it.
scary to play against.
He is. And now he's starting to do a few other things outside of just playing, but his first year and a half into it, I mean, I wouldn't even talk to him about anything on the business side because he is 24/7 locked in on play, 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 grow. I just want to train. And so, everybody's different though. So my question here really is that we've realized, as the pro scene is maturing, but it's still in this crazy stage where we don't really know exactly where the long-term sustainable largest revenue streams are for the players or for the tours. Players right now, if you are not top 5 or top 10, you need other things to supplement your income. And there's a couple things I know you're doing that are really cool that we'll talk about, like your podcast. Generally, what is a decision-making process that players should go through when they're entering playing pickleball, or they're playing pro pickleball and they're just trying to figure out, well, I want to spend as much time as possible on training, but I also want to think about how I can make money from teaching and from content and other things. How can a player navigate that decision?
That's a really, really good question. For me, I did the inverse. I came into pro pickleball and thought, I'm going to build a business around this because I'm probably going to get injured really quickly, or the game's going to pass me by, or I'm just going to suck. So let me like start a podcast and let me create content. And I love video editing, and like we can do this homegrown and we can do it super, super cheap. So I was always of the mindset of like build a business around your career as a pro pickleball player versus I think how 90% of the players come in is I'm going to be a pro pickleball player. I'm going to win medals and that's going to get me sponsors. When in reality, that isn't what gets you sponsors. It's a nice to have, but that's not what's going to do it. So for me, again, I've always looked at something as from the business side, and then how many different things can you do? How many different assets can you create in your portfolio, whether it be a podcast, whether it be a wildly popular Twitter account, whether it's great Instagram videos, maybe it's just YouTube instructional content, and just trying to go where there's the path of least resistance. Like what's resonating the most, right? If it's instructional content, maybe you want to lean into that. If it's camps, lean into that. I try and kind of abide by the rule of like the first 10 customers. Like, where did you get your first 10 customers? What were they interested in? And did they tell 10 people
Right.
about you or your product or what they just witnessed or what they just saw and what they did with you? And if they did, you are on the right track and go double down on that. Like I've definitely started stuff that hasn't worked. They say if you're having trouble starting, if you're having trouble, if you're having trouble creating 10 good ideas, you haven't created enough bad ideas.
Right.
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 Like I've got that red team, right? Like I'm 24/7. Like, what about this? What if we do a camp here? What if we do this? And a lot of those, I'd say the majority are really, really bad ideas.
It's so important though to have those bad ideas. Any entrepreneur, founder, CEO. I mean, if we were somehow able to actually look at the analytics of every good idea that a visionary or a leader of an organization has, number of good ideas ratio versus number of bad ideas. I mean, we're talking maybe 10%, 5%. I'm probably sub 5%. You know,
Exactly.
and it's so key. I mean, I think that I'm such an advocate for like the putting in time on exploring. Once you know you're in the right industry and you know you're in the right space, figure out how much value you can add to that space, to that same community, to that same customer base, using the same assets that you're already
Yes.
with.
And
So
be curious. So like my advice to Richard or to anyone just starting out would be really, really curious. And I think the less you can fixate on winning, the better, because then if that's not happening, you haven't put all of your identity eggs in the winning basket, right? You have an identity that's completely outside of that because you love teaching. Or you just started a junior academy. I mean, look at you and all your different endeavors. I was scared. I haven't talked to you in 6 months. I was scared to ask you when we got on the call what you've been up to because I was like, hey, like I can't even like mentally process the 7 new things I'm sure that you've been doing, right? So bring that curiosity into not just winning, right? And bring it into so much more than that. And then all of a sudden, what happens? You start winning. Like I actually think winning is kind of a byproduct of having the right attitude of training and then being diversified in other ways, being curious. Like my curiosity this year has led me to like meditate for the first time and to be more mindful and like starting all these gratitude practices. I haven't had a drink in 11 months. Like you just got to be curious and explore.
yeah, absolutely, totally right. And with the things that we're doing, I'm just trying to get on your level, Joe. All right. As I was preparing,
Trying to get on yours.
I was looking at the LinkedIn last week and I thought there was maybe a glitch. Is this long? Is this, it says 12 more experiences? What? No, that can't be right. No. Um, Very impressive.
Thank you.
And as we sort of wind down here, I wanted to talk about the specific endeavors you're doing off court. I know you have some podcasts, and so you outlined the general strategy that one should take of exploring. Would love to hear the specifics as you went to go build this business. We've talked about you as a pro player, but now just talk about the specifics of what you're doing off court in building that business, and just maybe how people can even access it and watch it and all that.
I think some other advice, and thank you for your kind words, Aaron. Um, some other advice I'd have is if you're just doing stuff you want to do, you're 100% not doing the right stuff. Like I wake up every morning and the harder I can start my day and the more stuff I can tackle that I don't want to do, like the better day I have. I did not want to start a podcast. My wife and I have a podcast called This Pickleball Life. I'm actually super, super private. I detested the thought of starting a podcast and I was pushed really hard by my dear, dear friends, very successful friends. And he said, you got to do it. Like, this is your journey. It's an interesting journey. Share it with people. They can learn. Had I not done that, forget what sponsorships it led to and focus on the fact that we were able to help a lot of people. Like, we revealed so much that was going on in the tour wars. We revealed like sexual misconduct and harassment charges from victims uh, against UPA and USA Pickleball. Like we became kind of these whistleblowers. And if you had told me that's what it was going to become when I started, I would have said, no way, right? Like there's no way we're ever going to become like investigative journalists. And there's no way that I'm going to like turn on my old colleagues at the PPA and MLP and reveal everything that they're doing that I think is really wrong and really unfair and really unscrupulous. And we did that. So I think just being open, right? Listening to the universe, listening to your red team of friends who are like, you got to do this or try this. You never know where that's going to lead you. And by the way, when we were exposing all that stuff, we talk about struggle. You asked me about struggles earlier. I had people from MLP, my former colleagues, calling me and telling me, you're committing professional suicide right now. No one is going to touch you with 100-foot pole. Are you trying to ruin every former relationship that you ever had with MLP and PPA? They're calling me every day telling me that. But at the same time, like the truth is just the truth. Like doing the right thing is just the right thing. And what did that lead to, a year and a half later? Like Gamma, my biggest sponsor, was like, hey, we love that you're speaking the truth, right? And the Jilly B brand isn't for everyone, and I get that. But I'm going to keep speaking my truth. And that would be my advice to anyone getting started in really any endeavor is make sure you speak your truth. And I don't know if that answered your question.
Absolutely, more than answered it. And I mean, I think that everyone who's listened to this either has been in a situation in life or has people in their life that are in the situation where they know the right thing to do, or they know what feels right. But logically, maybe on paper, maybe the perception that it's going to bring on them,
Yep.
not what they want, and you were experiencing that situation, and I think that you made the mature decision and the harder decision and the one that was, I think, the right decision. But not all people have the confidence and the comfort to be able to do that. What do people need to, I guess, get in touch within themselves to make themselves comfortable to make the right decision when they're faced with these two hard options?
It was really hard. It was a really, really hard time in my life. Like we were losing sleep at night. And I think what just kept us going was this notion that like there's a right and there's a wrong. Like some things are binary, right? And I thought the way that the players were being treated was very binary. It was very, very wrong. And that was a cause way bigger than ourselves. So I think the more you feel like again, in the Tim Ferriss book, there's this quote and it said, if you want to figure out what to do with the rest of your life, figure out what makes you angry. And I thought that was really interesting. Not what you love, not what makes you happy, what literally boils your blood. And he's totally, totally right. And this was something that boiled my blood, watching the players get mistreated. And, pickleball players don't have great representation. This is no knock on the existing agents in the sport. It's a reflection, Aaron, that there hasn't been historically, right, until very recently, money in the sport. And so why would these like great NFL agents or these great NBA agents come into the sport to represent a pickleball player for their, $500 a month deal? And so there was this group of players that were being really misrepresented and underrepresented, and that boiled my blood. So for anyone listening, yeah, ask yourself maybe not what you love, but what gets you heated, and you might find the courage and the strength and the passion therein to start something or pivot into something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, yeah, look, passion and strength are so key. And if you don't have those things in life, you have to accept a life of, I guess, mediocrity. You need passion behind what you do, and you need strength. And I think passion is actually a good segue into one of the last questions I wanted to ask you. Entrepreneurs and founders definitely, but anybody really dedicated to their career, if you're a founder or an owner of something you're super passionate about, or if you are an employee in a company that you're super passionate about and you're super mission driven, if you're in the right lane doing any of those things, you're probably doing something that is going to distract you when you're not supposed to be working, when you're in your off hours, when you're up at night in bed when you should
Yeah.
be watching Netflix, but you want to go back and follow up with an email. That's kind of a struggle that I have internally in my life where I'm pretty much 24/7. I can
Yeah.
just tell from what you've done, but also your personality that you probably also have like this extreme oozing passion and you just want to put your heart and soul into it, regardless maybe of the hour of day. Do you believe in work-life balance? And how can you be successful with things you're passionate about without it destroying your internal, personal, and health life?
Oh my gosh, that is the question of the year. Um, when I was at UTR, I had this amazing boss, and I loved him to pieces. And he left, and I ended up actually taking his job as head of commercial. And I will never forget, we had just had this whirlwind week on the East Coast for the PTR conference in Hilton Head. We come back, I'm jet lagged. It's like 9 a.m. On a Saturday. We've been working all week. And he calls me and he goes, "Hey, our CEO wants this report." And I said, "Oh my God, Juan, I just walked in the door." His name was Juan, and I love Juan. And I go, "Not right now. How about first thing Monday morning?" And he said, "There's a time for work-life balance, and it's not now." And I will never, ever, ever forget that conversation and how wrong it was and how wrong he was, and what a good lesson it was to me that that's not the right attitude. And I'm addicted to decision making. And this is something I just thought about yesterday, just had this conversation with myself. I'm addicted to making decisions and moving fast. And it can wait till tomorrow. Like all of this can wait till tomorrow. And if you're addicted to also doing like an A+ job on stuff, like B+ is better, and just get it done. So for me, I'm actually trying to work on work-life balance by telling myself like nothing's a rush. Like we are not doctors. No one is dying. It's pickleball. So yes, I do believe it exists, Aaron, but it starts with ourselves. I am the problem, right? Like I'm the one who went and did that report on a Saturday. I could have just said, "Fire me. I'll have it for you Monday morning." He wouldn't have fired me, like so I think we have to be disciplined and have some perspective that no one is dying if I don't publish the blog on time or publish my podcast on time.
There's a question that I always end with. It's a more generic question about loving pickleball. But actually, before I get to that, there's another question that I'm starting to just think of now that it might even end up being something I want to ask to players more consistently, like my last question, or like the one I'm going to ask next. But this one, I think really it might apply to you even more than other people because you just have such a unique path in this sport. You have so many interesting viewpoints. What is something you feel strongly about in pickleball that most people might disagree with you on?
Oh, that is a Tim Ferriss question. That is the what do you what do you believe that others strongly disagree with? All right, ask me again. Say it again.
Jill, what do you believe in that others strongly disagree with?
And it's pickleball related.
Pickleball related.
Probably that right now, competition is still good. I think we all, and this might be talking a little bit from both sides of my mouth because earlier we talked about, we don't want to be tennis. We want to have a cohesive ecosystem. Um, but I do think right now the competition is good in the sport, the dueling rating systems, the dueling tours. I mean, for sure, players are able to capitalize on that. But I think the best business model will win. And I think we're so nascent. And I think that's what people disagree with. I don't think they realize just how early we still are in pickleball. Like literally, if it's a mile long, if the journey of pickleball is a mile long, I think we're in like the first lap. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, well, we got a lot more laps to go. I'm excited. I'm strapping up. So, well, then, last question. It should be an alley-oop. Why do you love pickleball?
I love pickleball because it is pure joy. I get body bagged and I'm smiling. Do I want to win? Yes, but when I lose, I'm probably still smiling. I cannot help but be happy while I'm playing pickleball. And again, like even if that means losing, I just had the uh, pleasure of winning nationals with my partner Megan Fudge. We won women's doubles 3 weeks ago and got a bronze in mixed with Eric Onsens. And I'll never forget in the car ride home with my wife, I said, I'm really happy I won, but I think if I lost, that was okay too. Like I just did the best I could, and it was so fun to be on center court, packed crowd, having this opportunity. So pickleball is joy. It's what I love about it. It's just joy.
It is. It is. And so was this interview. Joy for me.
Thank you.
So that was awesome, and I appreciate your
Thank
time
you.
and coming on.